and those of you who may be listening on the internet, it's obviously not Zechariah, and I hope you're not too disappointed. But what happened was this: I determined that with the news that's going on in the world at the moment, that I would have a current affairs, at least a preface to the study. But brothers and sisters, the more I went into that, I must say to you, I was moved to the depths of my soul. I have never, ever, ever seen such signs as we've seen in this past week. Two of the most significant moves I think we'll ever see before the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. And this week, when I picked up, I don't get the Australian, but my son gave me a copy of the Australian. I turned up an article, a full-page article, which I will be illustrating up here on the screen. And I looked down, and I wouldn't have been surprised, brothers and sisters, if I read down the bottom that the correspondent was John Thomas, MD. It wouldn't have surprised me. It was unbelievable what's in that article. And I want to relate that to you tonight. I want you to follow it very carefully. I've got no notes here. They're all going to be up on the screen for you to see. And I want you to follow this with me very carefully, brothers and sisters, because we're on the edge of destiny. Now, I know that that's been said 1,000 times. And I myself would be one of the chief critics of brethren who excite our brothers and sisters only to see disappointment come. I don't want to do that, brothers and sisters. But at the depths of my soul, I believe we're nearly there. When you see what's happening in the world at the moment in two areas, it is absolutely staggering, brothers and sisters. It is absolutely staggering to see what's going on. And I believe we're seeing the moves that we were looking for years, definite moves in the right direction. And they can't go back on them. They're going to be pulled in that direction, brothers and sisters, and hell and heaven will never, ever stop them. Nothing's going to stop this. And we're going to see, I believe, the development of Bible prophecy like we've never seen, and we're going to get our bags packed for Sinai, brothers and sisters, because it's here. This is my earnest belief. And we've waited and waited and waited for this day, and I feel that we're on the threshold of it, brothers and sisters, and we're going to see this world changed. And there wouldn't be a brother and sister in this hall or who is listening to me on internet who doesn't share my sentiments that we long to see him, brothers and sisters. He's the only one that can fulfill our dreams, the dreams of a new world, of someone to take charge of this stupid, idiotic, evil world and bring it to its senses, and to help the poor and the needy, to rescue those people who are in desperate situation and children who are starving. We're dying for him to come. We're living for him to come, brothers and sisters. And to see these things happening is a thrill beyond its description. I pass on the regards of Brother Bob and Sister Margaret Baker tonight. He rang me just before I left home. He's looking on the internet tonight. He's watching me and he's hearing me, and he's probably seeing you people in the hall. They're not well, Bob and Margaret, and we pray for their recovery. Now, brothers and sisters, look what's happening. The Ukraine. This is the headlines of a full-page article in the Australian. Resisting the Russian bear. Do you know what that's all about? It's all about the election of a new president in the Ukraine, in the capital Kiev. And the population were expecting him to take that nation to a road of prosperity. And prosperity for them meant westward, Europe. But what they didn't know, brothers and sisters, that he was a stool pigeon of Putin. He was Putin's man. And when the opportunity came for Ukraine to enter into the common market, he turned it down in favour of Russia. And the streets are full of violent people. Because they know, brothers and sisters, there's no future in that northern empire up there. There's a future in Europe for them. And they are out in those streets, and they're still out in those streets, and it's becoming a desperate situation. That's what that's all about. But I want to show you some of the comments of the man who wrote this article. They are extraordinary comments, brothers and sisters. But first of all, for those of you who may not know the region, there is Ukraine. It sits, of course, on the north side of the Black Sea, and right underneath is Turkey. And of course you can see Soviet Russia there up in the north. That's the situation as it stands. Now look, what Brother Thomas said was this: the future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times. There's only several directions Russia can go with this issue. They've got to come down into the Ukraine. They want to take that into Europe to satisfy the demands. They want to take Turkey and they want to take Israel. And that's exactly what Brother Thomas said the movements they would make. That involvement there with the Ukraine and Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, can only take them in those directions. The things which will come out, brothers and sisters, of this situation will demand that sort of movement. There's no doubt about that at all. Now, here's what Brother Thomas said. You've read these words 100 times. But I want to highlight a couple to you, and I want to show you what this article says about what Brother Thomas makes reference here. You would think that the same man wrote it. The future movements of Russia are notable signs of the times because they are predicted in the scriptures of truth. The Russian autocracy in the plenitude of its and on the verge of its dissolution is the image of Nebuchadnezzar ready to be smitten by the stone. Now I want you to remember this comment. When Russia makes its grand move for the building up of its image empire, note that. Let the reader then know that the end of all things is at hand, as at present constituted is at hand. The long expected but stealthy advent of the King of Israel will be on the eve of becoming a fact, and salvation will be to those who not only look for it, but have trimmed their lamps by believing the gospel of the kingdom under the obedience of faith and the perfection thereof in fruits meet for repentance. They are well-known words, brothers and sisters. Excerpts from the Australian, 27th of January 2014. But as the huge mobs rampage through the streets of Kiev, a far greater battle is being played out. At its heart is former KGB Colonel Putin's barely camouflaged dream of recreating and rebuilding a revanchised greater Russian empire, the image empire, in Soviet Union style. That's the heart of the matter, says this man. And he goes on to say this. Years ago, now I want you to notice this comment, brothers and sisters, just think how significant this is. Years ago, at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the distinguished White House security advisor, Brzezinski, perceptibly wrote, without the Ukraine, Russia ceases to be an empire. But with the Ukraine suborned, and that means bribed, and the bribe was 52 million, which I'll show you in a minute, with Ukraine bribed, then subordinated, Russia automatically becomes an empire. Automatically becomes an empire. What does he say that for? I want to show you, brothers and sisters, why he said that. How does it automatically become an empire? He said that, in a nutshell, is what the uprising in the Ukraine, strategically located at NATO's eastern flank, is all about. And it sums up what is at stake in the crisis. I want to show you why he said that. He knows his history. If you've got the Ukraine, you've got the empire. If you haven't got it, you haven't got the empire. And that is Putin's uncamouflaged dream, as he says here. Excerpts from the National Geographic, March 1985, on the origins of Russia. Now, I hope you, when I've highlighted that, in trying to emphasise to you, I hope you got that in your head, what I said. Building up the image empire, the dream of Putin, can never, ever become a reality till he's got Ukraine and the capital, Kiev. Why? Well, here's the National Geographic of 1985. Viking roots stuck deep down in Russian soil when Scandinavian warriors and traders known as the Rus created the land's first organised state and gave their name to a future empire. Did you get it? This is the National Geographic talking. Just put that in conjunction with the Australian article, put it in conjunction with Dr. Thomas, put it in conjunction with the Bible. A future empire. The legendary Rurik of the Rus became Prince of Novgorod in AD 862. 1,000 years later, his bronze figure right adorns a huge monument in the Kremlin square of that city. A future empire? But by the 11th century, a Rus state centred at Kiev stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea. You see what that's saying? This is where it started. It started right here. And if you want a future empire, then this has got to be part of it. This, brothers and sisters, is the roots of the Russian Empire. Here's the capital, which is in the headlines of that article, Kiev. And this is an excerpt from that article. The mother of Rus cities, Kiev, graces the blue Dnieper nearly 600 miles north of its mouth on the Black Sea. The mother of the Rus cities. See what's happening? Still out of that National Geographic. Forced into a faith of their rulers' choosing, the people of Kiev are herded into the Dnieper by Byzantine prelates administer mass baptisms into the Christian faith. Tradition holds that Vladimir, we've got a Vladimir in the world today, a Prince of Rus. And this Prince of Rus dynasty later canonised for converting the Kievan Rus to Christianity. Prince of Rus. The National Geographic even got the title right. We can get up and tell the stranger, brothers and sisters, that Rus, or Ross, it's of course the same thing, is an ancient name of Russia. They got the title right. Because the Bible had it, didn't it? Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, Prince of the Rus. So in 1885, they got that right, didn't they? And here in the very embryo of the ancient Roman Empire, the whole root system, the origins, right here in Kiev and in Ukraine, was that title first ever used. And if that's true, then we can expect that when he comes, the message he won't hear, but will sound in the ears of the saints, will be calling him the Prince of Rus. And his first name will be Vladimir. I don't know whether Putin's going to be the last of the Russian rulers, brothers and sisters, but he's got a tenure of over 10 years to go, I think, with a promise of another 12 afterwards, and I cannot see this world lasting that long, can you? Isn't this an incredible thing we're reading here? We all know this, but when you relate it like that, and then we're not talking about Christadelphian writers, this is the National Geographic telling us this. It's an incredible thing. Russia takes its name from the Rus. Other Vikings, many out of Sweden, thrust across the Baltic deep into the east, where they were called the Rus. Their legacy, it says, their legacy lives on. Russia itself takes its name from these adventurer merchants. This is their seldom told story, a tale as astonishing as the saga of the Western Road. You see, every country is deeply embedded in its history. The roots of that history go down the ground, the country grows out of it, and we know about the British Empire, we know about a lot of things that relate to our nation here, although we're of course not related to any great empire. But the Russians are related, brothers and sisters. Deep down they are related. And it's part of Putin's dream. And he cannot afford to see that country go east, or go west rather, into Europe. He cannot afford. And if it's going to go into the west, into Europe, he must take it with him. That's what this chap's saying. He's saying if he's got any sort of a dream about this Russian Empire, he must take the Ukraine with him. Because it is absolutely critical. It is the foundation of that empire that he dreams of. Back to the Australian. It is a test of wills between the West and the Russian President Vladimir Putin that has potentially far-reaching geopolitical implications. But that would be an understatement. America, Great Britain, will be on their edge of their seats, brothers and sisters, watching that. There's no doubt about that. The potential importance of that treaty cannot be overstated. It would have to set Ukraine alongside a path towards a European future, in sharp contrast to the way it was for so long dominated and exploited by Moscow. See what the correspondent's saying? He says it's absolutely critical that Putin takes that as the substratum of his empire, and it's going to be critical for him to take that into the West with him into Europe. That's what he's saying. Because he knows that they cannot subsist economically without Europe. And Putin knows that. And he knows it better than ever now, brothers and sisters, because there's oil springing out of the ground everywhere. In South America, in the USA, out in the Mediterranean, everywhere, in places in Europe, oil's coming out of the ground like you wouldn't believe. And gas with it. Gas fields are being found everywhere, brothers and sisters, at the moment. Putin knows that his power is slipping. There's one answer to that. There's only one answer. There can be no other. He's got to rebuild that empire, and it's got to start at its roots. And when he gets it rooted into the ground, he goes west to Europe. That's what that fellow's saying. You think Brother Thomas wrote that? Finally, Yanukovych, whatever his name is, and his colleagues bowed to Moscow's pressure after Putin signed them up to 15 billion. What did the article say? After he has been bribed and subordinated. The bribe added up to 15 billion in aid and investment, and promised a 1/3 discount on all future energy supplies. By agreeing to the Putin deal and effectively returning his country to the embrace of the Russian bear, Yanukovych set the stage for the mass demonstrations and violence now being seen. That's what it's all about. And the Pope has added his blessing to the peace. And look what happened to his attempt. Here he is, looking out of one of the high stories of the Vatican City on the Vatican Square with two little children, letting out two beautiful white peaceful doves. And they got pecked at by crows and a seagull. And although they escaped, feathers went everywhere, brothers and sisters. And I say, go the crows, because that couldn't have been happened to a better man. That's what Almighty God would think of his attempts. Those pigeons, those doves had no sooner been let loose than look what happened to them. Because this chap, who is the absolute epitome of evil, this fellow supports, brothers and sisters, what Paul calls vile affections. Vile affections. He supports it. This man's church abused little children for years and years and years. And nothing was done about it. And if anything was done, they would just move from one place to another to continue their abuse. He is the most evil person in the world, brothers and sisters. And he's associated with the building up of this image empire. And he wants it to bring peace. Peace. You know, brothers and sisters, his kingdom will entirely disappear from the face of the earth. If you read the history of Babylon, of course, which was typical of Babylon the Great, if you go into the book of the Apocalypse and read the same thing about the real Babylon, the real great Babylon, One thing stands out in Yahweh's judgment. Yahweh will judge the nations. He will humiliate them. He will release the people who they've oppressed. He will bring equity, brothers and sisters, and truth and love and happiness to many people. Rome will entirely disappear. There will not be a stone above the ground. It will entirely disappear. 3 of the beasts representing the other nations had their lives prolonged for a season and a time. The 4th horrible, dreadful, immoral, vile system, brothers and sisters, completely disappears. And the saints will shout for joy. And the earth it'll be a memory, but it'll absolutely obliterated from the minds of men and women. That's what God thinks about those doves, and that's that system. It's blasphemy, brothers and sisters, and hypocrisy in the highest order. And we hate that system with a pure hatred. Now, coupled with that, and I hope you got the point, you didn't learn anything. You learned what Brother Thomas said. You knew about the Russian Empire, but did you know about its roots? Did you know about the stakes that are there in Ukraine, that are like a hinge upon which all that hinges, and that's where Russia is going to come into. That's where the strife is right now. He's going to land right on the eastern border of the NATO forces in Europe. And right just below the Black Sea is Turkey, and just below Turkey is Israel, and this is where he now makes his second move. What has happened here, brothers and sisters, is incredible. Another twist in the drama. Russian bid to become a dominant power in the Middle East. Look at it. Sitting there, Mahmoud Abbas and Vladimir Putin, meeting in Moscow, January 2040, just a few days ago. There's the Gaza Strip, and there's Israel alongside of it. And in the Gaza Strip, brothers and sisters, there's about just under 1 million people. There's only 6 million in Israel. If you took the populations of, just say, mid-Western Africa there, along the northwestern coast, about midway up, through to Saudi Arabia, and added up the total of the Arab opponents they have in that area, they add up to 337 million. And Putin decides he'd like to speak to Miss Abbas. And you know what happened? Mahmoud Abbas walked out of a peace talk between Israel and America to go and meet him. Now you think about that. He walked out, brothers and sisters, abandoned that meeting for this one. What's that telling you? This is what the report said. Russia's Prime Minister meets the Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, in Moscow, January the 23rd, 2014, just a few days ago. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas and Russian Prime Minister Medvedev were in talks to secure a $1 billion energy deal on Thursday. The deal between Gaza and Russia also sought to restore warmer relations between the two allies, as Russia has recently developed closer ties with Israel. The agreement reportedly includes a massive natural gas project in the Mediterranean Sea off Gaza. Let me just pause. He's telling these people that he will drill for gas in the Mediterranean off the coast from the Gaza Strip in the territorial waters of Gaza. They don't exist. You can only have territorial claims when you are a recognised nation. Gaza is not in that league. It is illegal what he's telling them, and the world knows it's illegal. They have no territorial waters, but he's telling them they have. And he goes on to say Russia's natural gas company Gazprom was planning to produce 30 billion cubic metres of natural gas at the site, according to the Russian news agency TASS. And it goes on, brothers and sisters, to say this. Let's get back here. The Russian engineering firm Technoprom Export was also considering an oil development project in Ramallah in the West Bank. Ramallah, right up there in the north of the Gaza Strip, right next to Israel, right there, right next to Israel, an oil well. However, it was not immediately clear when the projects might be launched or how far talks on the deals had advanced. Russia, now listen to this, Russia has been a close ally of the Palestinians since the Soviet era. Moscow has called for East Jerusalem to be established as the capital of a Palestinian state in the past. What do you think's going to happen if he proposes that when Israel won't have a bar of that, and he knows they won't have a bar of that? I'm going to suggest to you what's going to happen in a minute. Abbas landed in Moscow on Wednesday and began his 4-day official visit by meeting with President Vladimir Putin. Abbas was also scheduled to meet, now listen to this, with several other Russian political and religious leaders during his stay. Religious leaders. And we're talking about a fanatical Muslim. Think of it, brothers and sisters. Just think of it. What do you think will be the outcome of those discussions? Well, I know somebody saw the outcome of that. Maybe not related to those particular discussions, but I can quote you a magazine which saw what was going to be the outcome of any such discussion. And that magazine was the Time magazine. Put out last year or the year before. Sometime, anyway, the last couple of years that came out. Time magazine, the Jewish flag, to go! That's what it's saying, isn't it? To go! And the most sensible proposition that could ever be put up to Russia and all its allies and all its Muslim friends, and it is a sensible proposition. There's no, because they're not Bible believers, because they don't know what we know, because they're unscrupulous, because they don't care about people's lives, the most sensible thing in the world would be to sit down and say, brothers and sisters, sit there around the table and say, these nations, which were all their allies, and say, now listen, let's face it, 6 million Jews? 6? And from right over there in Algeria, right across to Indonesia, the Muslim belt, 1.6 billion people? Come on. And I would suggest that that conference will inevitably come up with the one decision. It's expedient that 6 million go for the life of the world. Here's a kid who believes it. A Muslim kid in the streets of the Gaza Strip. For world peace, Israel must be destroyed. Now, you know what that is? In the Bible, you know what that is? I'll show you what it is. Thus saith the Lord God, the Lord Yahweh, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into his mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. That's what it is, brothers and sisters. I firmly believe, I am convinced that that is the evil thought. Look what it goes on to say. What's he going to say? And thou shalt, I will go up the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are rest, that dwell safely, all of them. I'll go up there and I'll get rid of them. That's the most logical thing in the world. Why should 6 million people hold up the progress of peace of nations and the prosperity of downtrodden people, the Muslim people? Why should they? Just 6. No, it's expedient. And I'm absolutely convinced that that's what's going to be the decision. I reckon that's definitely the evil thought. And you know why I'm convinced? Because I've learnt, brothers and sisters, over many years of study, that Yahweh's judgments are poetic. They are very poetic. And you will remember this. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, ye know nothing at all. In other words, there's no other solution. Now, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people and that the whole nation perish not. In that brute's mind, who had no morals, couldn't care less about the Son of God, puffed up with his pride and his ambitions, brothers and sisters, that was the most logical thing in the world to say. Why should this carpenter from Nazareth stand in the way of us and invoke the Roman opposition and destroy our nation? Isn't it better to just get rid of him? And here's Yahweh's poetic justice, brothers and sisters. And he will rescue that people when 2/3 of them are gone. And their blood is spilt out on the soils of Israel and of Palestine. And Russian boots trampling on them. He'll leave it to the last minute and rescue them, which he didn't rescue his son. His son went all the way because of the righteousness of God to declare that flesh profits nothing. But living a perfect life, that the Spirit gives life, he had to go all the way. God will rescue those people who will come under the exact same decision at the very zenith of their destruction by the hordes of the Russians. You think of that, brothers and sisters. What else could be discussed around the table with Putin and Abbas and all his other Muslim mates? What else could be discussed? They'll never solve their problems among themselves, Sunni and Shiite. They will go on fighting each other. Their hand is against every man and every man's hand against his brother is the exact description that Yahweh gave of the Arab people. They'll fight everybody and fight themselves. That's exactly what they do. And it'll go on and on and on until somebody says, hey, listen, I've got an idea. And here's Putin sitting down with Abbas, talking about oil wells and gas and all sorts of things, brothers and sisters. Don't tell me that didn't come up. Do you mean to tell me that Abbas, with all his bitterness against the people of Israel, went out there with his mouth shut on that issue? And Putin's ears would have been wide open. And what has Russia got to lose? They may be, of course, denigrated by Britain, America, in the Commonwealth nations, but 6 million Jews are gone, according to them. Hitler took that many out in Auschwitz and other places, didn't he, in the Second World War? He took 6 million out. Oh, the world condemned him, but what was he trying to do? Build a world empire, wasn't he? The way to the world empire is get rid of the Jews. Isn't that the way? Well, he's going to see that. And he's going to see, well, darn what the Commonwealth nations say. Darn what America says. He will be applauded by 1.6 billion people. And the most populous nation of all of them is 400 miles from our border in the north. It's Indonesia. And they will throw their hands up in the air and cheer. But it won't happen. He will nearly achieve that. But it won't happen. And we know why, brothers and sisters. Because of the stealthy advent of the King of Israel, which I believe is on the eve of becoming a fact. Russia's not dabbling at the edges. Russia's being dragged into the very vortex of those prophecies, right to the centre and origin of those prophecies. Understand what I'm saying? It's not that we discovered anything new, that we haven't been taught by Brother Thomas, but now that we are the living witnesses of him being drawn into the absolute vortex and foundation roots of the ancient Russian Empire. Understand that? See how important that is, brothers and sisters? This is not just a small movement in one way or the other. This is a major step. And I believe when Russia gets... They cannot afford Ukraine to be lost. And when they get in there, they're going to become entrenched and they will not be going out. To go out would be a bit failure. Back into the confines of Russia. Everybody's got gas and oil now. Who cares about Gazprom? And Putin's dreams all fade into history and Obama becomes the champion of the world. There's no way Putin will allow that. He's too proud for that, brothers and sisters. This, I believe, the scriptures has caught him. He doesn't know that. But it's caught him.